In this video, I'll show you 10 seemingly innocent mistakes that could turn deadly. I've literally almost died from some of these, and I bet you're making some of these without even realizing it. Let's go. This year, my wife Diane spent 5 days in the hospital and could have died because of mosquito bite. She had hemorrhagic dengue fever, which can cause internal bleeding because your blood vessels get leaky. And if you're from a place where mosquitoes don't normally carry dangerous diseases, it can be easy not to take them seriously when you're traveling abroad. But mosquitoes are no joke. If you're in an area with dangerous mosquitoes, always wear good repellent and long sleeves, even if it's hot out. Next up, this year I went to Nepal and was hiking around Mount Everest, and I can't tell you how many people I saw getting helicopter evacuated down because of altitude sickness, which kills people every year. But what most people don't realize is you don't need to be climbing mountains to get altitude sickness. Some cities have really high altitudes and you may not even realize it unless you do research beforehand. And if you don't, you risk getting sick just flying into the city, especially if you don't take precautions and you immediately go out for a heavy workout or drinking and partying or something. The first trip my wife and I ever took together, we flew into La Paz, Bolivia, which is apparently the highest capital in the world. I was a pretty fit dude back then, and I remember that I could barely walk up the stairs to our hotel room. Long story short, don't underestimate the dangers of altitude and always give your body time to acclimatize. Next up, have you ever thought about what you would do if you had a medical emergency but couldn't speak the local language? This happened to us in Bulgaria. Diane started feeling this weird chest pain, and so we rushed to the nearest medical center. Nobody spoke English there, and the nurses were just looking at us like we were crazy. Luckily, we had an Holafly eSIM on our phone, and they were also kind enough to sponsor this video. Our travel data plan allowed us to open Google Translate to Bulgarian, and explain all the symptoms that she was having. It was pretty stressful even with that travel eSIM on our phone, but if we wouldn't have had data on our phone to translate, it would have been a complete nightmare. Holafly offers data plans in over 200 destinations and unlimited data plans in over 150 of those destinations. This makes them unique compared to many other travel eSIM companies that focus on smaller plans. You can also download languages in Google Translate ahead of time for offline use, which is what I highly recommend, but this can be easy to forget when you're busy planning everything else. While we're talking about emergencies, it's important to remember that in many places, calling 911 isn't going to get you very far. You need to research what the emergency number is for that specific country. It's also important to remember that travel eSIMs like Holafly usually are data only, and they don't come with a local phone number. So to be able to call for help in the case of an emergency, I use another easy solution. You can just create a Skype account and load $5 of credit onto it. This credit never expires, and it allows you to make local phone calls in the country where you're in, and it just deducts a few cents per minute from your credit. That said, to be able to make these calls with Skype, you need to have an internet connection on your phone, which is where an eSIM like Holafly comes in. So basically, Holafly data plans keep you connected to the internet, and Skype allows you to use that data plan to make local calls in case of an emergency. And having that data plan on your phone also allows you to quickly look up the emergency number if you forgot it. The next deadly mistake is one that I made while racing rickshaws around Sri Lanka, but this could happen in any country. We were cruising through the national park when all of a sudden we turned a corner and we were face to face with a ginormous elephant. Elephants are cute, right? I fed them before in Thailand, so why not do it here? The big guy graciously ate our bananas, and the meanest thing that he did was grab my hat and fling it down the road. And we didn't realize how lucky we were that this dude was in a good mood, because it turns out that wild elephants are savages and they kill people all the time. And the same goes for other cute wildlife you see during your travels. It's called wildlife for a reason, so you need to keep your distance. I know we all want to get that epic Instagram pic, but it's not worth your life. Next up is the travel mistake that sent me to the hospital 2 times, requiring surgery in Cambodia and Thailand. And it's actually the topic of the very first video we made on YouTube. When you're in Southeast Asia, renting a scooter is just the thing to do. It's what all the cool kids are doing. And while I admit that these things can be awfully convenient, I highly recommend not trying to learn to ride for the very first time when you're there, which is what a lot of people do. And even if you already do have experience riding motorcycles like I did, riding in a different country is a whole different ballgame. Locals drive differently and do unexpected things. Tourists who have no riding experience do unexpected things. Animals do unexpected things. There's going to be unexpected things in the road around corners where you can't see them. Whatever you do, do not let your guard down. I crashed on a slick, curvy mountain road and shattered my wrist, but if I would have crashed on the next curve, it would have been off the cliff. And when I got to the hospital, there was another American biker who'd been biking for the past 20 years sitting there with a broken leg. Riding scooters abroad can be fun, but just make sure you always know the risks. That said, even exploring on foot can be dangerous if you're not careful. One of my favorite things to do whenever I get to a new city is to just wander around and get lost. But there's many times where I look down a street or an alley and I wonder to myself, is this safe? Kind of like this alleyway down here that I want to go to right now. Sometimes it's honestly hard to tell, which is just another reason why I'd like to have an eSIM like Holafly on my phone so I can do quick research before I go wandering up into that pretty looking favela. I like to install my Holafly eSIM on my phone before I leave home so I have data the second that I land in my destination. That way I don't have to rely on sketchy Wi-Fi at the airport and to have my own connection to look up maps and use rideshare apps to safely get to my hotel. Their setup process is super simple. First, go to the website I linked below to check to see if your phone is actually compatible, which is really important. And after that, just search for your destination and choose your plan length and then check out. From there, you'll get an email with easy to follow setup instructions. You can also do all this from within their mobile app, but if this is your first time doing it, I recommend using their website because it shows you more details. Then after you get the hang of it, the app can make the process even faster. And if you have a trip coming up, you can buy your Holafly eSIM now and then just wait to activate it until the day of your trip. You can get a discount today by using the link below or discount code Project Untethered at checkout. Another time I almost died while traveling was on one of my very first days outside of the United States. I was staying in a hostel in Isla Mujeres, Mexico, and my dorm mates had the brilliant idea to go out to take a dip in the ocean at midnight. We hopped the fence, dove in the water, and quickly realized that no matter how hard we swam, we ended up getting further and further away from the coast. At this point, I started to panic and I swam as hard as I possibly could for 10 or 20 minutes. At least it felt like 10 or 20 minutes until we finally made it to the shore with the two other people I was out there swimming with. We literally just stood there hugging each other because of how thankful we were to be alive. Turns out that that fence that we hopped had a sign that said, "Peligro, no se permite nadar." But sign or no sign, there's a big lesson here. First, the waves might look fun, but never underestimate them. And second, learn how to escape undertows by swimming parallel to the shore until you're out of the current. Basically, just do the opposite of what I did, which was trying to swim against the current and fight it. Moving on to the time I got sick in Patagonia and lost over 20 pounds in 3 weeks and how this could happen to anyone. We went on a 10-day trek through Torres del Paine where the water that's coming down from the mountain was so clean that you could just fill up your bottles every day in the rivers. And after our trek, we moved to a town a couple hours away and I totally forgot and I took just a tiny little swig of water to take some medicine. Big mistake. I threw up every single meal for the next 3 weeks and had to go to 2 different hospitals in the middle of nowhere. And by middle of nowhere, I mean it. We already had flights to Easter Island where we had booked waterfront tents for a week, smack in the middle of the ocean. At least it was a beautiful view to puke from. Anyway, eating bad food or water can really freak you up. And a lot of adventurous travelers, including myself, tend to be pretty reckless for these sort of things, especially when it comes to street food. We figure that since we've never gotten sick before, we must just have strong stomachs. But let me tell you, it only takes one time, my friend, so don't risk it. Give this video a like if you're surprised at how I've managed to stay alive for this long after making all these mistakes. And buckle up because this next one's a doozy. I need to get away from this river because I'm getting eaten by mosquitoes and breaking my own rules. So I mentioned before how Holafly eSIMs have you covered in most cities and tourist destinations and how their unlimited plans are safer than buying just those small 1 to 2 gigabyte plans that can run out when you need it most, like when you're lost. But if you decide to venture way outside the city or go off the beaten path where there's no coverage, then even an unlimited plan isn't going to help you. And there is one very important thing you need to do to prepare for this. A few years ago, Diane and I were van lifing around the national parks in the US, and we decided to go on a hike in the desert in Arches National Park. There was a well-trodden out and back path, but at the halfway point, we saw a sign for an unofficial loop that went off the trail to explore all the cool different rock formations. There was no people, there was no path, there were no signs, and I'm not sure when, but at some point our cell signal disappeared. We were literally lost in the desert and it was starting to get dark out. Then, right before panicking, I thought to check Google Maps. Thankfully, a few weeks before, I had downloaded Google Maps offline for this area, and there was just a small dotted line that led us back to the trailhead. And without having that offline map, we would have been royally screwed. So always download these before traveling to a new place. Now, avoiding death is good and all, and I seem to have a decent track record at it so far, but there's some other non-deadly but very serious issues that can happen to you while you're traveling if you're not careful. To prevent these from happening, there are 5 travel safety tips that most people forget, and I cover them all in this video. One of these is why it's important to tell white lies while you're traveling, and even though it might sound a little bit strange, it helps keep you safe. Don't forget to grab your Holafly eSIM for your next trip using the discount link below. Like, subscribe, do the things. Love you, see you, bye-bye.